Chapter 37 Bats in the Belfry. Damon. The king's early retirement didn't halt the festivities in the throne room. Though the lavish celebrations were on behalf of his daughter's wedding, Damon found pleasure in the rich foods, the sweet drinks, the merry tunes, and the waggling tongues of inebriated guests. The excess luxury was something only the most important nobles of Westeros could hope to experience. Yet, though the feast took place in the extravagantly decorated throne room, with the guests dressed in their finest attires, Damon didn't observe much difference between a drunken noble or a drunken vagrant. It affected both regardless of birth station, making them prone to act in ways they otherwise wouldn't, such as drunkenly spilling all their grievances onto Damon. The Lannisters had never been his ally, but now that the scorned little kitten from the rock was eating so readily out of his hand, it was Damon to stop him from divulging such prudent information. "It was a neglectful oversight to overlook your house, Sir Tyland," Damon agreed. Sir Tyland Lannister was well into his cups, or he wouldn't have dared speak so plainly. One could almost claim he was drinking like a sailor, a rather fitting expression to use for the master of ships. Damon felt the docile effects of the strong wine too, but he was dealing with it far better than the high-born Westerland knight. "It was no easy task to fill Corlys' seat, but you've been a good master of ships, steadfast in your duties for the last 18 years. "Exactly," Tyland slurred passionately, clapping a hand on the table, his drunkenness reaching a stage that was challenging to understand him. At least he had wits enough to keep his voice hushed as she leant close to Damon. "For 2 decades I've served His Grace faithfully. I spent years of my life in the crown race, upholding my duty and enriching the crown's coffers with navy frames that I could have favored my own house, and yet we get no recognition at all." Tyland pouted like a sad kitten. "Shitty like your seasick and resign my post in projects. It's not right." Damon noticed a wench looking around for someone to serve, and he readily obliged. "Wench," he called, pointing to the Lannister's goblet. The girl came over with sweet-smelling arbor gold, whilst Damon kept acting the supportive ear for the lion to vent his grievances to. After all, couldn't Damon understand? He too had once been snubbed by his king brother, but now he stood more secure in his standing than he'd been in decades, going from exiled and disinherited to the future king. Yet, Damon chafed to once again be the second choice. Even after marrying Rhaenyra and finally reclaiming his former heights of power, somehow it remained his lot in life to deal with Viserys' cast-offs. Whenever his brother slighted someone, they went running to the second son for support. Damon would take advantage, but it still irked him. This is how he ended up warring in the Stepstones a couple of decades back too, how he married Laena. "What has the Baratheons contributed? Nothing." Tyland waved dismissively towards the Baratheons. "They've kept the throne for ages, and now Varys' daughters get to marry Daemon? Whatever Lions? Lions are better than stags. Lions hunt stags." Tyland let out a burp and then kept right on complaining. "My brother has more daughters than he knows what to do with at the rock. And a son too? My house deserves the recognition, Damon." "Hopefully the slights can be rectified," Damon agreed, nodding along. "When you suggested Aemon marry my niece Shara, I thought you were trying to play us something. But you've been trying to give my house the recognition we deserved all along, didn't you? While those have worked with for years." Tyland trailed off and squinted at Damon with bloodshot eyes. "Good man you are. Sorry, good prince." Aemond is betrothed now. "That is His Grace's directive." "But Rhaenyra has some promised sons of age with your nieces.
My good sister Joanna is in favor of the match. The match. And I've ridden my brothers too. But Jason is lost. Jason's got the final say.
Once again, Damon strained his ears to make sense of Tylen's slobbering pronunciation. What better match can any lady hope for but to marry a prince? It's why Lady Joanna journeyed to the Red Keep despite expecting the birth of her son, is it not? The Lady of Castle Rock should never have been made to leave empty-handed after such strenuous efforts during what should have been her moons of confinement. I'm sure the advice you imparted in your missive and Lady Joanna's counsel will sway the Lord of the Rock. I hope to have a close relationship with the Westerlands when my wife ascends the throne. Dazed on wine, Tylen's mouth lifted into a rather dazed smile. One could almost mistake the normally dry-witted man for his boastful twin brother.
What of Cecilia? Jason would not give Princess to his son. They're only a couple years apart.
Damon hummed non-committally, though internally he scoffed. Visenya? Married to some fat cat in the West? His secret daughter was the only child of both himself and Rhaenyra who took after them completely in looks. A pure Targaryen princess concealed behind a Valyrian banner. Imagining little Visenya alone amongst pompous kittens with no Valyrian roots, bereft of fire and magic in their blood, sat as uneasily with Damon as a piece of spoiled fish sliding down his throat. Over by the doorway, Damon saw his princess wife had just entered the throne room at the same time her half-siblings Aegon and Helena left together. Rhaenyra strained her neck, searching for something in the throne room before locking eyes with him. She was clearly trying to draw his attention, and judging by her expression, it seemed Sir Tyland wasn't the only one who needed Damon's ear tonight. The way Rhaenyra twisted the rings on her fingers, the stiff lilt of her mouth and the hard glint in her lilac eyes, warned Damon he'd likely hear some fresh grievance she'd suffered. Again. The last few moons had consisted of frequent outbursts of displeasure from his wife. From Princess Emma's death, Rhaenyra's growing dissatisfaction with Visenya and Viserys' wet nurses, to their disagreement over Laenor. With his wife in mourning and recovering from childbed, it meant their marriage remained as cold and unconsummated as his daughter's would be. Though these festivities had been a brief reprieve, bringing forth some of their old rhythms. Yet the particular expression Rhaenyra gave him now, that she was displeased in an offended way, was normally one she wore whenever she had an encounter with his brother's queen, more than anything else. He took his leave of the drunk Lannister, rather pleased with the excuse of seeing his wife to avoid further discussion of Visenya's betrothal prospects. Daemon had already enough with Baela's marriage, and he didn't wish to invite further head pains concerning his daughter's futures. After hearing Rhaenyra's account of Corlys's outrageous succession plans, Daemon didn't waste a second to confront him. Had the shiplord thought a damn feast would keep him clear of any repercussions, that it would soften the blow? With a hand resting on the hilt of Dark Sister and a sharp smirk that stood at odds with the wrath in his eyes, Daemon approached the sea snake. What a fitting moniker, including both the treacherous sea and the slyness of snakes. You have a nifty saying about storms, don't you, Corlys? To elude a storm you can either sail into it or around it, but you must never await its coming. In your mind, which route are you sailing now? Daemon said, fire heating in his chest and ready to spew out. By pissing on your son's dying wishes and disinheriting Luke, do you fancy yourself steering into the storm? Or does your plan to flee to the Stepstones at the earliest convenience mean you are eluding this storm? There had been no warmth in Corlys' behavior since he returned from Laenor's funeral, but in the weeks since his veil of grief had morphed to spiteful anger. Now he turned to Daemon with squared shoulders, barely keeping the mask of tightly controlled composure. I'm not fleeing anything, Corlys said quietly. I'm facing my demons head-on, both at home and at the war I must return to in the Stepstones. Daemon tilted his chin up, watching him closely. You're brewing a storm you can't handle, and it will surround you on all sides. Who do you expect to aid you in your war now, Corlys? What difference will it make? It was once our war, a sentiment you've seemingly forgotten. Kin, battle, and interests. There was much I once assumed we shared and agreed upon. Damon's dark tone made it clear that wasn't the case anymore. Yet for the sake of our shared kin and long friendship, I am willing to overlook this insult as an impulsive reaction to your recent loss, and I'll expect you to reconsider your hasty decision before it's too late. You know precisely why I did this, Corlys said. Had you truly acknowledged our friendship and shared bloods, we would not be having this discussion, and Laenor would remain my heir. If you are accusing me of some depravity, I bid you speak more plainly. Corlys's lips wobbled, his eyes burning with such a sharp accusation and tumultuous rage as they pierced into the prince. They'd reached the crux of the matter. Corlys suspected him of Laenor's death. Why though? Corlys had been at the Stepstones, so who'd put that idea into his head? Princess Rhaenys? Damon's blood boiled, his body locking up and ready for the trap to spring, for the snake to strike and speak his baseless accusations. They remained baseless because Daemon had made sure of it. He'd taken no joy from the steps required to secure his place. The sacrifice weighed on him, but it had been necessary. Laenor had proven entirely ineffective, falling short on each and every promise he'd made to Daemon, and growing increasingly bothersome for each year. What was the point of keeping him as Rhaenyra's mother's husband when he couldn't do anything right? When he slowly but surely was actively working against Daemon, all of it culminating in Baela losing her crown and exchanging her husband for a Hightower. Being promised the hand of the queen position wasn't good enough anymore when he no longer trusted Laenor could secure Rhaenyra's crown against Otto's grandson. Daemon had tried to advise Laenor to leave Westeros, but he hadn't listened. So which other option was Daemon left with? He had no choice. If his daughter wouldn't be queen, then Daemon sure as hell demanded to be king. I didn't make this decision with haste or on a whim, Corlys said. It didn't surprise Daemon that Corlys proved controlled enough that he didn't start spitting accusations of borderline kinslaying within the walls of the Red Keep, but it was a disappointment all the same. Daemon sorely needed release. You will not change back the order of succession. Daemon shook his head, unable to stop smiling as he pictured Dark Sister cutting down the proud Lord of the Tides. He'd gut him like a fish and feed him to his beloved sea. Even if the Lord of the Tides suspected Daemon and so disinheriting Rhaena was Corlys' method of getting revenge on him and to a lesser extent Rhaenyra as well, to think the ambitious man would go this far? It was craven as well. Corlys made this move only to flee across the sea, leaving his wife and house to deal with the repercussions of his decision. And there would be repercussions. Surely Corlys didn't expect anything else. Then I recommend you cherish these hours before the sun rises, Corlys, as from tomorrow you'll never see your grandchildren again. Corlys frowned. Are you threatening me? Obviously, Daemon drawled. Did the heat in the Stepstones leave you delusional? You scheme to disinherit my daughter and still expect my support? If you see fit to disinherit Lucerys and Rhaena, then you and your wife are no longer welcome at Dragonstone. He spat. You're naming Prince Viserys heir at your own risk, Corlys. Don't understand, the boy will never know you. He will never step foot on Driftmark while you are its lord, and you will be without access to any of those who'll make up your legacy, be it grandsons or granddaughters. Prince Viserys is not your son. He's a true Valyrian. So is my daughter, Daemon said, barely above a whisper. Or do you not count Laena's blood as Valyrian enough for you? You speak of the other child of mine you took away, Corlys spat. The gods are cruel. You blame the gods? Corlys asked. Laenor died in a filthy tavern and you coveted his wife before his body cooled. You forget I know you, Daemon, and I've seen you do this before. Daemon shook his head, chuckling humorously at the useless accusation. They were all words and no proof. Laena's betrothed challenged me to a duel, and I expected a better opposition by the man you chose worthy of your daughter's hand. It's not on me he died from his injuries. It was an honest duel. Aye, and how did your first wife die, Daemon? Are you blaming me for the actions of spooked horses and tearing wounds? Those are the flimsy of fate, Corlys, and you know better than most how fickle life is. Yet I'm noting a pattern when it concerns people standing in the way of a position you covet, Corla said. If only that were true, then the cunt of a Hightower hand would be dead decades ago. Then I advise you to consider that pattern carefully. Corla stepped forwards and Damon smiled, at last feeling the Lord's composure starting to fracture. But at once their standoff was cut off, quite literally. With no warning, the hall lit up. It wasn't the doing of the torches, candles and fireplaces either. Damon startled as the dark windows inexplicably flashed with light, so bright it was more fitting of the height of day. The light streamed through the tall narrow windows of the keep and illuminating the throne room starkly. Damon's mind jumped to dragonfire bathing across the glass planes. And yet it didn't fit. It was more like pure sunlight. Next, a loud boom reverberated through the keep. Thunder? Taken aback by the sudden light and noise, the music died out, and more than a few drunken guests stumbled and yelped. What? Corla hissed. Lightning? Was the castle hit? It had certainly sounded like it, but it was a clear night sky, full of stars with a bright moon. So how could lightning strike from a clear sky? Across the room, the guests were left uncertain of what the strange phenomenon had been. Some laughed nervously as they sat down. Some headed towards the windows to look out while a few guards headed outside. But it didn't escape Damon's notice that neither Rubius nor Hariel were amongst them. Hariel. The guard who approached her, a 19-year-old guy from Cobbler's Square named Crass, orphaned with a little brother who joined the garrison of the Red Keep a year ago through a connection with his uncle, was seemingly clueless as to how Fang ended up locked and tortured within a dungeon cell. That's what he'd frantically claimed while begging for mercy after Hariel had disarmed, bound and put the fear of a slow death by fire on him. His stuttering reaction was convincing enough Hariel believed him. He might have fooled her, but in return she'd likely traumatized him, and regardless, he wasn't a priority. Cress and the other guards meandering around the black cells were barely a blip on her radar as Hariel brought Fang out, frantic for help.
How did she get in? Is she breaking out prisoners?
Ignoring them, Hariel dashed up the stairs, leaping several steps at a time. Their outrage was an insignificant background buzz to her, drowned by her own ragged breath, while carefully keeping Fang levitated.
Halt! Explain yourself!
A couple guards stood shoulder to shoulder on the narrow staircase, blocking the only exit. They must have heard the ruckus below, but seeing Hariel appearing from the lower levels bewildered both, though they remained prepared to stop any potential jailbreaker. Out of my way! With a sharp swish of her holy wand, the two guards went stiff-limbed, toppling down the stairs like bowling pins. With frightened yelps, the last few guards leapt aside, pressing their back tight up against the wall to let her pass, afraid she'd turn her magic on them next. As long as they cleared the path, Hariel didn't care what they thought. Hagrid. She needed Hagrid. Fang needed Hagrid. Outside on the Trader's Walk, the unpleasant chill was enough to pierce through her spiraling thoughts. Fang hung at her side in midair, hurriedly wrapped in torn fabrics from Hariel's gown, where the pretty lilies across the green textiles were strained crimson. Fang's face was so swollen he could hardly open an eye. His mouth was a raw, inflamed wound. His teeth and tongue were gone. His shallow breath, the strange sounds he made, it was terrible. Free of the dark cells, Hariel became unsure where to go, torn between running inside for somewhere Fang would be comfortable or to look for Hagrid. Her attention was drawn towards the glimmering candlelights from the windows of the castle. Behind her, Hariel could hear the guards scurrying around the black cells, while ahead distant music and cheerful sounds drifted from the throne room. Hariel set off, wanting as much distance between Fang and those cells, her ragged breathing dragging cold air down her dried throat. How could she be here with Fang in such a state, tortured and in agony, whilst people were laughing and jesting just beyond the next wall? It was absurd, and it made Hariel sick to think how not so long ago she'd been one of them. She'd likely been dancing while some son of a bitch was pulling Fang's teeth out. Her thoughts kept muddling together, bouncing wildly between extremes of "Who the hell did this?" to "I'll kill them," to "What do I do?" Hariel raised her wand in the air. Wherever he was, outside, inside, down or up high, she needed Hagrid to find them right now. Mere red fireworks sparks weren't sufficient. What if Hagrid was inside and didn't look out the window? A blinding bolt of lightning flashed into the dark sky, momentarily illuminating the Red Keep in the glowing flare of her vivid spell, followed by the piercing noise of thunder crashing across King's Landing. It was so loud it startled Fang, which saw Ariel stopping immediately, freezing up when she remembered how scared Fang was of thunderstorms. She hadn't meant to add to his suffering. "Oh God! Shh, boy, it's alright. I'm sorry, so sorry, I had to. I'm sorry, it won't happen again." Ariel stopped talking, since beyond Fang's whimpers, she'd heard another noise as well. She strained her ears. It had almost sounded like shouting. But whatever it had already been silenced, and Ariel dismissed it as relevant. Though surely that had been enough to draw Hagrid's attention. He'd recognize her spell work and come look. But would he know where to look? She might have gotten his attention, but he'd need something to steer towards in the night as well. To make that easier, Ariel chomped fiery globes and left them hanging in the air above their location. It gave Fang some heat against the winter night, and the warm light of the fireballs dancing in the air like oversized fireflies was glaringly out of place. "What's going on out here?" a familiar voice called. The first to seek out her signal wasn't Hagrid, but a Kingsguard. Dressed in the same armor and helm as the others of the Order of King's Sworn Knights, Sir Stefan had to speak again before she was able to identify him. "What was that light, Lady Ariel?" "Hagrid! Where is Hagrid, Sir Stefan? Where is Hagrid?" Ariel demanded. "And where's the fucking Kennel Master?" Last Ariel saw Fang, he was left under the care of Kennel Master Kolb. Was he involved? Had he given Fang to those who did this? If he had, she'd curse him. If he hadn't, she needed his help. Sir Stefan was surprised by her complete lack of composure, and then ignored her questions to ask his own. "Your attire. Did someone attack you, my lady?" His worried gaze trailed from Ariel's gown to Fang. "What's that?" Wrapped in torn pieces of Ariel's gown and swollen beyond recognition, it was likely hard to discern the gaudy truth by a glance. Her lightning spell had been effective, though, drawing a crowd onto the courtyard of servants, guards and guests alike, most prominent Lord Corlys and Sir Otto. It also turned out she'd been trailed from the cells by a stray guard. "She broke into the Black Cells! Apprehend her!" The guard was running up the Trader's Walk, gesticulating wildly towards Ariel. Sir Stefan straightened to his full height. "What are you speaking about? This is no prisoner. This is Lady Ariel Potter, ward of the princess. She's been attending the festivities. I saw her not long ago in the throne room." "She's been casting spells on the guards, cursing our men and..." "Excuse me, you stole my dog and tortured him!" Ariel whirled on the guard, and the fiery globe sizzled, responding with spitting sparks and smoke to punctuate her point. The guard's eyes fixed on the fire, as if he'd somehow missed them until that moment. Perhaps he'd assumed to light mere fire from torches, only to now realize it was magic that could be used to burn him if she so willed it. Sir Otto looked at Fang and started to put two and two together. How could this be so hard to understand? A single look at Fang should be enough for any dunderhead to get the picture. She pointed furiously to Fang. "Yes! What sick chaff does such? Look at him, he needs help! Where's Hagrid?" "You did this to Lady Ariel's dog?" Lord Corlys asked, breaking off from the crowd while Sir Otto was gesturing for Sir Stefan to send the curious spectators inside. "On whose authority?" "No, I haven't tortured no hound!" the guard denied, going on the offensive while pointing angrily at Ariel. "She's the one who attacked us! My dog ended up in the dungeons on your watch!" Ariel reminded the man. No, I didn't! I don't know where she got that from, but she cursed our men! Cress is talking gibberish and the captain can't move no more!" "Did you assault the guards?" Sir Otto asked Ariel sharply. On the hand's orders, Sir Stefan had successfully turned most of the curious spectators away from the scene, though Lord Corlys was not budging. "I retrieved my dog, they tried to get in my way, but unlike them, I haven't permanently harmed anyone." "Was the thunder your doing, Lady Ariel?" Lord Corlys inquired. Yes, because Fang needs help! She cried, frustrated. They didn't have time for this useless chit-chat. Would anyone aid him? And to her great relief, someone finally did.
What's happening here?
A large shadow appeared around the corner, so big and familiar in a way it could only be Hagrid, and Ariel had to hold back the urge to weep with relief. Hagrid!
Ariel? What was the spell for?
Hagrid bellowed. A smaller, thin man hurrying after him she instantly recognized as the Kennel Master. Where have you been?
I've been looking for Fang. I was told he was... Huh?
Hagrid trailed off, the sight of Fang morphing his expression from confused to blank shock. They locked him in the black cells. Ariel's voice was choked. She aimed her wand at Fang to regain better control of the hovering charm. He needs your help, Hagrid. She made a start walking towards the keep, cancelling her fiery orbs with a wave of her wand before gesturing in the direction of Hagrid's chamber.
Whom are you accusing?
Sir Otto asked pointedly, following after them towards the doorway where a few reluctant stragglers were still hanging about. The eavesdroppers quickly dispersed into the castle once they realized they were heading for the same door, though.
And where are you heading? That thunder you magicked frightened the wedding guests. I must insist you cease your flying magics before it gets worse.
A wave of fury washed over her. Excuse me? Was my dog's torture an inconvenience to your festivities, Lord Hand? Fang was taken from your kennels into your dungeons. I was denied access to retrieve him by men under your guards to get our pet while he was being tortured under your guest rights. Otto straightened his posture and kept his chin high.
Guest rights are for men.
They were halfway down the corridor. Hagrid at Fang's side with Ariel keeping the spell in check, but at that she stopped and whirled on the hand. Then should Lord Boris be made aware his horses might be stolen into the black cells for torture if he leaves them in the king's stables?
Whatever has occurred is a regretful oversight, Lady Ariel. It's a most unfortunate accident.
Accident? Accident? Who was he if accidentally locked in the black cells? But Ariel was cut off.
You're getting hysterical, Lady Ariel. Remember, it is but a hound. We will reimburse you and Lord Hagrid for your troubles with the hound from the kennels. You can have 2 if it pleases you.
Careful, Hightower, Hagrid threatened. He spoke quietly, but everyone immediately became very aware of him. The little of his face visible underneath his shaggy beard was chalky pale, his coal eyes glimmering with tears.
We signed an alliance contract with you hours ago, and this is the first thing you pull. Pardon? We had nothing to do with this, Lord Rubius. Then stop making excuses! Stop nagging Ariel when she was forced to break into the black cells
Hagrid was choking on emotions and looked furiously towards Fang to point out what she'd had to find.
If you didn't do anything, then find out who did. But no, I will learn who did this with or without your helping hand, Lord Hand.
Of course, we strongly condemn this. Sir Otto turned to his sweaty kennelmaster Kolb, who'd so far trailed in their wake but remained dead silent. He was staring at Fang red-faced with veins protruding on his forehead. They were saved for their argument by a servant coming running down the hallway, heading straight for Otto. Lord Hand, I need to talk to you, he said urgently, distracting Sir Otto, and even Ariel felt a moment's curiosity. The servant was out of breath and worked up about something. Did he know who did this to Fang? Before Ariel could ask, Hagrid took the distraction to excuse themselves.
No, let us be. I have to see to Fang.
Bela. Seated with her back against the tower opening, a leg dangling treacherously over the ledge and a lantern at her side, Bela looked over the horizon of the great city of King's Landing during the hush of night. Moonlight shone dimly upon the blanket of white snow across the countless uneven roofs, and Bela wondered what it was like to be down there. To live in one of those small homes where a whole family, from child to grandparents, shared a single bed. They bought, carried and made their own meals and lived from hand to mouth. How would Bela's life have turned out if she wasn't the daughter of Prince Daemon Targaryen, and was instead born a commoner? Surely, no one sold a smith's daughter for alliances. Bela would be living in one of those cramped houses. Poor certainly, with a dirty and cramped home, but without royal expectations. There was something about that freedom that drew Bela. It reminded her of the time she visited the home of Hariel's maid back on Dragonstone. The small cabin was overfilled with a family of 6 living within such a tiny space. It looked repulsive, and yet they made it work. The maid Aliza was cordial, her daughter Ariel apparently healthy, and there was no pretense of rules for them. Their family seemed happy in a way Bela's hadn't been since her mother died. The small folk may be small, but they were free to follow their hearts. They could be whatever they wanted, marry whomever they chose, and travel wherever they wished without guards barring their way. It was a simple life where they only had to worry about themselves without the restrictions of a noblewoman. They weren't sold for alliances, trapped in castles with no say in their own fate. They got a say. It may be a small say in insignificant matters that would never affect the crown or kingdom, but they still had more say than Bela did. Growing up, her tutors preached the same tune, claiming as long as Bela took her lessons seriously, excelled in the arts, was a good dragon rider and did her duty, then she'd get what she was owed. Kings needed proper queens and Bela would have it all. Such sweet lies they'd sung, and Bela had believed them. "Lady Bela, is that you?" Sighing annoyed, Bela turned away from the view of King's Landing. The argument with her grandmother lingered in her mind like a fresh cut, and she'd climbed the belfry to get away. "Princess," Bela said curtly, getting up to her feet. She'd known coming up here would merely be a temporary break, but why her? She'd heard the noise of someone climbing the ladder, but of everyone, why'd she come to seek her out? "Where have you been?" Helena asked. Bela turned to the princess unimpressed. "Here?" "Obviously." "Your absence has been noted, good sister. Your guests wonder why Aegon got the wedding pie without his lady wife." "I required a break from the festivities." "This is a peculiar place to seek a respite." Helena glanced between the big bells to Bela, wringing her hands. "Could you step away from the ledge? You're making me nervous." "Why, good sister?" Bela asked. She'd crossed the sea and touched the clouds on Moondancer's back. What was a bell tower in comparison? "Surely you don't fear heights?" It wouldn't surprise Bela if she did. Helena was timid, lacking both claws and fangs. She was supposed to be a dragon rider, yet Bela saw no fire in her. The younger of Viserys' daughters was simply a Hightower cloaked in Valyrian wrapping. She'd have done better sending to reach to her mother's true home than living here, cleared away in their tall stone tower alongside her relatives. Hightowers thought their stacked bricks could somehow compete with wings, when it was obvious to anyone with eyes that dragons, true dragons, flew higher than any tower could reach. They could stand at the tallest ledge of their high tower, smugly looking down at the land stretching out below whilst feeling clever for how high they'd climbed, yet Bela would still look down on them astride Moondancer's back. "Helena, is she up there? Is that who you're talking to?" Aegon called from the chamber underneath the belfry. "Aye, Aegon," Helena answered. "It's cold, slippery and dark too." Helena fidgeted timidly with her glittering bracelets. "Wouldn't you be more comfortable out of the cold? Should we join the wedding festivities, Lady Bela? It's been such a great success." Heh. Bela chortled humorously. Of course she'd say that. Bela had seen it all. How Jace was seated next to Helena during dinner, the two talking and dancing together. "I noticed you and Jace were enjoying the wedding together." The words bit like lemon juice on her tongue, and a sudden sting in her eyes forced Bela to look down. Not that it mattered much. As always, Helena was unable to speak directly to the person she was addressing and was focusing on a point somewhere over Bela's shoulder. My betrothed has been very kind to me. But Jace shouldn't have to be. It should have been her. This should have been Helena's wedding instead, and Bela should have been next to Jace. Helena. She was like a leech. Never satisfied unless she coveted everything intended for Bela. Spinning falsehoods into Hariel's head, stealing Bela's one true love and usurping her station of future queen. Even after robbing her naked, Helena threw her leftovers at Bela while expecting her to smile and be thankful. Her hopes of rescue were in vain though, and now Rhaena was thrown to the wayside by their grandparents too. What had they done wrong? This wasn't fair. Her only path forwards was to uphold her duty as Aegon's wife, but how to do that? Certainly Aegon was handsome and had never been directly unkind to Bela. All things considered, he'd been on his best behavior today, but that didn't change what Bela had seen of him before. The prince was always so bored, never taking initiative for anything unless his overbearing mother nagged him into it. Not to mention how her future child would be the younger sibling of her old maid's child. A bastard boy he didn't take responsibility for. House Velaryon had seen to it that the maid and her bastard son made a comfortable living working at the docks of Driftmark, as was only proper when the boy was the son of a prince. But Aegon? The father himself? He hadn't bothered answering the missive about the birth of his bastard, and hadn't shown his face on Driftmark again before Uncle Laenor died. Aegon was hardly the only noble she knew with bastards, but the others gave a damn whether their child lived or died. Bela wasn't sure Aegon even knew that Dracarys Waters was his bastard's name. What if he treated Bela's children that badly as well? Would he care for them? Her sister insisted Aegon would care for any issue Bela gave him, as they would be his only true ones. But Aegon showed so little regard for anyone it was hard to believe. He dismissed his mother's advice, he embarrassed Aemond whenever possible, he belittled his nephews, ignored his older sister, and while betrothed to Helena he'd snubbed her publicly. Such a pattern of behaviors didn't speak highly of how he treated blood, be them trueborn or bastards. "What is keeping you?" Aegon called up, and Bela heard the creak of the wood as he stepped onto the ladder. "You don't need to climb up, Aegon," Helena said, crossing her arms over her chest and creating friction by stroking up and down for warmth. "We'll be down shortly." "You may leave as you wish, princess," Bela said. "But I brought a coat and I'm not ready to return to the festivities." This was her wedding, and Helena didn't get to dictate where the bride could go. Bela wasn't the only one ignoring Helena's directives though, because Aegon appeared up on the ladder, unfortunately. Bela could get away with refusing Helena, but not her new prince husband. Aegon reached out to steady himself against the bell while adjusting his footing. "What are you doing? Needlepoint? I want to get back to the feast." He looked rather disheveled from the long day and feasting. Aegon's hair was disheveled, he'd unclasped his collar for comfort and there was a stain on his coat hardy from spilled liquids. "Seven hells, it's piss cold here." Aegon shuddered. "Lady Bela, Mother sent for you ages ago, and she's vexed by your continued absence. The guests are talking." Bela bit the inside of her cheeks, staring hard at Aegon. "They were here because the Queen was upset? Did Bela's woes inconvenience the Queen's perfectly planned celebrations? Why was everyone jumping to solve her displeasure but never Bela's? When had any of these people accommodated her needs or wishes? It was so unfair that Bela was being forced to do so for them." "I had some grievances on my mind, husband," Bela said tightly. Aegon looked fed up. "What? Was the entertainment not to your taste? Did the minstrels play the wrong song? Take it up with the steward another time. It's our wedding and your frequent disappearances are becoming an inconvenience." "That's not it." Oh, if only this was about the wrong tune being played. No, his sister was being disinherited, yet Bela couldn't say that either. Rhaena hadn't been made aware of their grandparents' betrayal, and Bela still held out a sliver of hope that it could be avoided entirely. Then what is? Coming and going without leave and your short attitude with the guests, you're behaving rather ungrateful. For a split moment, Bela could see it vividly within her mind's eye. All that it took was one wrong step, A little push, and Aegon would fall over the edge of the belfry, and Bella would no longer be his wife. The moment the idea popped into her head, Bella tried to push the thought away, a burst of shame flaring in her chest. Those were sinful thoughts, a kind of evil that would see her cast into the seven hells. Aegon was her husband, and he had every right to demand his bride's presence. Yet Bella wished his bride was anyone but herself. "I came up here seeking solitude," Bella said, and Aegon shifted under her stare, glancing away from her unblinking hardness. "But the belfry has become rather crowded. I will retire for the night." "You have to return to the feast first," Elena said quietly. "It's your wedding, and we have traditions which needs to be upheld." "Why?" Bella said. "What use does my presence serve? There won't be a bedding, so all I'm missing is sitting bored at the head table, waiting for the guests to be sated on merriment so I may retire too. I don't want to leave this tower." "Pull yourself together," Elena sighed. "You're tired, but so are we all. It's only for a little while, and then you and Aegon will retire." "I don't want to be at that stupid feast, chatting with your ladies. I don't want to see my grandparents. I want to go home. I don't want to be here, and I certainly don't want..." Bella held her tongue just in time, but the furious look she cast at Aegon was likely more than telling. His mouth formed a tight line, and for the first time it struck Bella just how much the prince looked like his mother, far more than any of his siblings did. Though Aegon had Valyrian coloring, wearing that expression, the son and mother became almost identical. "We don't have time for your tantrums." Aegon stepped forwards, grabbing for her. It was instinctual for Bella to dodge out of the way and scurry backwards. The jerky movement and thin layer of ice on the floor nearly saw her trip over, but a last-minute hold of the bell allowed Bella to regain her balance, before she scurried around the dangling bronze instrument. In a rush she accidentally knocked over her lantern, snuffing out their only source of light except the moon. "Get back here now, Bella," the prince commanded. "You're embarrassing yourself." What was she doing? Bella knew she'd pay for her disobedience, but she was beyond caring. And even if she stopped this instance, she was already in trouble. "Am I embarrassing you, Aegon?" she taunted as Aegon headed around the bell, while Bella kept moving too, keeping the heavy dome construct as a barrier between herself and Aegon. "Can't catch up with a little girl," she sneered. "Can't control your wife." "Stop, stop, stop," Helena murmured repeatedly, backing up against one of the corner columns. "Stop it." Neither heeded her. Aegon didn't move quite as steadily as Bella, but he was faster with a longer reach. Considering how much she'd seen him consume, the prince held up relatively well under the befuddling effects of wine. Aegon suddenly ducked, going low under the bell. The belfry wasn't spacious, and the only way to flee was down the ladder. She tried to leap for it, but in that moment Aegon's hand shot out underneath the bell and he managed to grab a hold of her. Holding firm, he came out from below the bell, his eyes bloodshot and expression like stone. Bella could tell this altercation had turned from a brief disagreement to something far more dire. She'd never seen him look so angry. Bella felt a rising pressure of fear, the hairs on the back of her neck rising and her blood pumping ever faster. "Let me go!" Bella's hold didn't break, and instead he raised his other hand and slapped her so Bella's head snapped sharply to the side. Bella clutched her burning cheek. The hit had been far harder than Septa Maga's disciplinary methods. Maybe he regretted it, or perhaps he assumed that was enough, because Aegon finally let go of her. It was an earned judgment. Seeing red, Bella pulled back her fist and punched him. Her knuckles connected with his jaw, and now it was Aegon's turn to stumble backwards. The shock and pain of the punch dazed him, whilst Bella's cheek and fist felt like they were on fire. But she was a true dragon. Burning only meant fire, and fire made her blood boil hotter. "You unhinged cunt!" Aegon snapped, massaging his jaw. "Don't you ever..." Bella meant to threaten dire consequences if he tried hitting her again, but her voice was drowned when lightning struck from the clear sky above. A thunderous crash boomed over the red cube just as a jolt of stark light momentarily made her go blind. It took Bella completely unawares and was so startling it snapped her out of her rage. Even with her back pressed up against the column, Helena jolted so badly she nearly fell. But Aegon was not so lucky. The prince shouted, and in unison both girls looked over only to see a swirl of Aegon's flailing limbs as he disappeared over the edge. It took Bela a moment to understand. One moment he was there, and next he just wasn't. Bela went rigid. Helena covered her ears, and next Aegon's scream cut short as he crashed into the foot of the belfry. Hariel. Kennelmaster Kolp was the only person they allowed into Hagrid's locked chamber, hoping beyond hope to man who something that could be of assistance. It was there Hariel learned Kennelmaster Kolp had lost track of Fang's whereabouts while he was inside eating dinner with the servants. At first, Kolp had assumed Fang must have escaped the kennels on his own, but after the initial search had been unsuccessful, the Kennelmaster had gone to inform Hagrid his dog was missing, and the two had gone looking for Fang together. He didn't seem to have anything to do with this, but he was trying to help Fang as if his life depended on it. It certainly didn't look good for Kolp to lose a lord's dog that was under his care, but this was beyond a neglectful moment of inattention. Obviously what happened to Fang was deliberate. Whoever took Fang had done so with the purpose of harming their dog and hide their tracks. But though Kennelmaster Kolp had done his best to aid him, his efforts were all rather useless, and he'd sent him away hours ago to try to find some magic that could save Fang instead. Though as they'd already experienced before with Lena, and again with Lenor, there was only so much they could do. Their magic could do a lot to prevent being harmed, but once struck down, Hariel felt as helpless as a muggle. Now Fang lay splayed out on his bed, trembles running through his body, eyes bloodshot and breath shallow. Fang was disfigured and broken, and it hurt like piercing knives to see him this way.
He's hurting, Hariel,
Hagrid whispered, his massive hand hovering over Fang's head. Normally he'd have reached down to pet or stroke his fur, but such actions only hurt the dog now. Touching him hurt him, yet at the same time not touching hurt as well. He was in agony regardless of what they did.
It's bad, Hariel. Ugly.
A wrathful shadow crossed Hagrid's face. Terrible because it wasn't one she'd ever seen so plainly on him before, though it went away the moment his black eyes fell on Fang and helplessness took over.
His teeth's been pulled out, his tongue's cut, and his legs are... his hip was all... but I don't think he's going to make it from this, Hariel. Though even if he somehow don't die, he'll never walk again. He can't eat or drink on his own anymore, and he's in horrible pain. He don't deserve this pain. I don't want him to suffer.
Hariel's eyes swam with tears. So you think we have to... The blurry outline of Hagrid's head nodded.
I think he was tortured. He's not coming back from it. With how bad he is, the best I can do for Fang is to take the pain away.
Her ears rushed with blood, and something that could only be described as a whimper pushed up her throat. Hagrid made sense, but this was Fang. He might have been Hagrid's dog, but after years together he'd become Hariel's pet too. He was one of the only three who remembered Hogwarts too. Fang might have been a mere dog, but that mere dog was more family to her than the Dursleys ever were. She had fed him and walked him and lived by Fang's side for 5 years. From those early days back in the fishing village while they were fruitlessly searching for a way home, to Pentos and across the sea to Dragonstone. Hariel loved him, and now the only way to ease Fang's suffering was by killing him. You... right now? She breathed, oh so carefully resting her hand on Fang's neck.
Waiting is only prolonging his suffering, Hariel,
Hagrid said quietly.
Say your farewells and I'll do it.
Hariel carefully combed her fingers through his dark, warm fur, trying to cherish the touch as she'd never be able to do this again. It felt absurd to imagine a world without Fang, but the inevitable was racing for them. He was a dog, but even if he couldn't understand English, maybe he picked up on the feelings behind the words, and it was now or never. Fang, she murmured, eyes stinging as they blurred with tears. You've been so good, boy. I know it hurts, but this was so unfair. You've been so brave. Her voice broke when Fang's bloodshot gaze fell on her. Fang trusted them so much. Surely he expected them to save him. That now that he'd been rescued from that terrible place, the next step would be to mend his injuries. He trusted them to make it better. That's how it went in the songs and stories, right? The victim is saved and then everything is made well again. How come the tales didn't cover the part where the victim succumbed to their injuries? Where there was no silver lining and the concept of justice was reduced to a meaningless string of letters because it only existed in written theory and not in practice. All they had left was loss. You'll be alright. You're with us now, and you'll be free and running soon. Snuggling on the chair. Have all the belly rubs and ear scratches you want. So much you'll be sick of them. She smiled, wet and miserable. You are the best dog. The best dog in the world. In worlds. The sorrow was choking her, making it too hard to speak. I'll miss you. Then it was Hagrid's turn, but for Hariel his gruff murmuring morphed into a white noise. Outside, dawn was upon them. This morning looked near identical to yesterday's, yet so much had changed. She remembered the first time she met Fang in Hagrid's hut for tea, and his way of greeting her by resting a soft and heavy head in her lap while leaving slobbers all over her skirt. She thought of the long days spent with Fang in the fishing village, when nothing had made sense except that Fang was still the same old Fang, and even world jumping didn't change that. How, when Norbert first learned to cast fire and she was burning everything within sight, they'd taken refuge behind boulders together, being awoken at the crack of dawn by Fang pushing his snout into her stomach because he wanted a walk. How patient Fang was with Hagrid, putting up with his habit of adopting anything from lost little witches to baby dragons into their mismatched pack of creatures. The sky was brightening to another cold winter day as Hagrid's voice faded into a heavy silence. Time had run out. Hariel dipped her head, teeth clambering tight in a fruitless attempt to stay her grief, but she had to, if only just a little longer. Her fingers closed around a stretch of leg just above Fang's injured paw. That way, it was almost like she held his hand. Hagrid shifted forwards over his dog. In the distance, a dragon roared, and next second, Fang jerked as a faint crack made Hariel recoil. Fang's whisper ceased, and his paw went limp in her hand.